Hey everybody, welcome to Watches with Dennis, and today we are going to talk about Rolex. So Watches and Wonders 2021, the virtual trade show for the watch industry, is going on right now, and we have almost 40 companies that are dropping new products, new reveals that they've been working on for years. And I figured Rolex would probably be a good one to start with, given how famous they are, and there was a lot of hype coming into this show because the new Rolex Explorer Ii was expected. The Rolex Explorer Ii is one of Rolex's tool watches. Not been a particularly popular model, but everything lately has been popular coming out of Rolex. And this is the 50th anniversary of the Explorer II, so people have been expecting big things. I think I should go ahead and explain, because I know I've talked about this on another video, but not everyone watching is probably familiar, because I made some jokes at the expense of Rolex regarding the attainability of their watches. So I think in case any of you are new to following watches or don't really follow Rolex, basically the situation that exists is such that authorized dealers are commonly referred to as ADs, those places that are the official sellers of new Rolex watches, do not tend to have steel watches in stock, like at all. If you go in, it's not that the display case is totally empty. Ladies' wristwatches are usually present. Precious metal, highly expensive watches are usually present. But anything that's sort of a tool watch has been difficult to get. And what happens is those end up on the gray market, which are the unauthorized resellers. So they're selling unworn watches, but they are not ADs themselves, and they mark the prices up. So I think a few months ago, for example, I was curious. So I looked at a no-date Submariner, which MSRP is a little over $8,000. And I found it at a gray market unworn for $14,000. So to give you an example of what's going on now, and this is new. This is a relatively new phenomenon. It's not pandemic driven, but it got worse during the pandemic. But I'd say probably for the last 5 years or so, this has been common for Rolex. I mean, back when I bought my first mechanical watch, which was 13 years ago now, that you needed to be, if you wanted a Daytona, you'd go on a wait list. So you'd have a relationship with an AD, you'd have bought a number of either jewelry or watches or whatever through that AD, whatever they're selling. And then that would get you the ability to get on their wait list if you wanted to buy a Daytona at retail. Otherwise, you'd need to try and go and buy one used or through the gray market. But over the last 5 years, it's gotten way worse. So now it's like everything. Explorer 2s, Explorers, Yachtmasters, Air Kings. It's like anything. Oyster Perpetuals and Datejusts are at the stage where if they're the steel versions, then they might not be in the display case. And you can try and get on a wait list and get one from the AD, or if you're impatient, you can go on the gray market. But the thing is, most of them are selling for more now. It used to be only the really popular models sold for more. The gray market might buy a set of watches from Rolex. Most of those they'd actually sell at a loss, or at least lower than retail. So you'd save money going to the gray market because they make all their money on the Daytonas and the Submariners. But now it's just different. So anyway, a little bit of context for people regarding Rolex. So let's start with the new Rolex Explorer II, or I should say the new Rolex Explorer II, because they did reveal one. Here is an image of the new Rolex Explorer II, and here is an image of the model they are discontinuing. Can you spot the difference? Because I can't. I suppose this is the biggest shock / letdown. It probably shouldn't be. It's Rolex. They're a really conservative company. They are all about incremental change, but you would have thought for the 50th anniversary, they'd have done something interesting. And they really just haven't. They just haven't. And I actually like the Explorer too. A lot of people find it a bit of a plain Jane watch, but I think it really screams tool watch, which again, not all of them do. And I mean, that's been the point. I mean, Rolex is seen as a luxury brand. Their pricing is very much a luxury brand, but they were all about making tool watches, and this is a tool watch. So I will give them credit. There were a lot of rumors going in that they were going to change the bezel around the dial to ceramic, which I thought was a terrible idea. I get it. I get why buyers would want it because ceramic is scratch resistant, but this watch officially on paper is for spelunkers. And if you're smacking your watch up against a rock and it's got a ceramic bezel, that bezel's going to break. a stainless steel bezel like they've done, I think, forever with this model and are continuing, will get scratched. But it won't break. And that's the point. It's a tool watch. It's supposed to serve a purpose. And I don't care if only 0.5% of the people buying Explorer 2s actually do mountain climbing and spelunking. That's what it's built for, so that's what it should be doing. And I think I'm glad Rolex at least didn't lose sight of the roots of the watch and decided, no, it's all about aesthetic now, and it's not really functional. Because as those who have seen my other videos know, on tool watches, I'm really big about them actually serving whatever functional purpose they're being advertised as. I don't like dive-inspired watches, and I don't like spelunking-inspired watches. I expect them to do the job that they're designed to do. That's the purpose. It's a mechanical device. This isn't a set of earrings. So what did they change? Well, it's really about the movement. And so the outgoing model was using the caliber 3187, and I'm not going to run through all of the specs on the movements because I think most of you really don't care. The main change that people are going to notice and appreciate is the power reserve. So the old movement had a power reserve of roughly 48 hours. This new caliber, which is the 3285, it has a power reserve of 70 hours. So that's the big change. It's still, going to be a superlative chronometer, and so it's going to be highly accurate. I believe the old one was plus or minus 2 seconds a day, and I think that's what the current one will be gauged at as well. So really, it's just the power reserve that you're going to appreciate, and that is a significant improvement in terms of power. So if you're someone that likes to take your watch off, would you want to get the new model? Maybe. I mean, the old one with a 48-hour reserve basically meant you could probably get through not wearing it for the weekend. I suppose if you took it off on Friday night, it may be dead Monday morning, and this one won't. So I'm not sure that's enough of a motivator to go and get the new one. It's still 42 millimeters. A lot of people thought Rolex has been making their watches bigger lately, which is kind of running against trend, it seems. I don't know. I'm probably not savvy enough to tell you that. But like watches in the early 2000s just started to get really big. It was like this whole everything needed to fit Schwarzenegger and Stallone style sizing. And now it seems like a lot of watch companies are starting to tamp down on that. But Rolex has not. Most of their dial sizes on their 2020 reveals got bigger. So now the watches themselves didn't all get bigger because the cases have been getting slimmer at the same time. That was the big thing in 2020 with the Submariner is the dial got a millimeter bigger, but the lug-to-lug got a millimeter shorter, so the watch wore basically the same size, but it was all hotly debated. I mean, people are debating over a millimeter. Well, welcome to watches. This is what we fight over. So I'm assuming this has the new casing, so even though it's 42 millimeters diameter, if the lug-to-lug is shorter, and most companies don't advertise their lug-to-lug in their spec sheets, so I don't know yet what the lug-to-lug is on this, but we will find out. So assuming it's like what was in 2020, this watch might actually wear about a millimeter shorter than the old model. That may be attractive to some people because the biggest complaint I had heard about people who are Rolex Explorer 2 fans was when they moved to the now old model from the prior models, which were 40 millimeters, that a lot of people felt the old models were a lot better. I thought that the dial layout looked a little bit better. It's very, very subtle, but everything just looked a little blown up on the bigger ones. I still think that's the case. I still think, well, I like the orange on it. I don't think that the dial layout is actually as attractive as it was in the 40 millimeter. Visually, the only difference that I know of is, and you can see in this image, down at the 6 o'clock position, you see the little crown between the words Swiss and made that's printed on the dial. That's new. That crown isn't there on the outgoing model. I believe they do that now to reflect the new movement. So now that the caliber 3285 is in the watch, that's why that crown is there. So it's not really an aesthetic change designed to make the watch more attractive or anything. It's a functional marking. But it will be a way for you all to visually be able to know which watches are using the 3285 and which watches are using the 3187. Because other than that, maybe unless something, if you're really close spotting like differences on the bracelet or something, you're not going to be able to tell the difference between this watch and the old watch. So, I mean, overall, I'm disappointed, I guess. I wasn't in the market for it, but I mean, there was so much speculation. Some of it was really goofy, but 50th anniversary, a lot of people thought, and I thought it made sense, that they'd find a way to work in Rolex green on the watch, just to honor the celebration of the anniversary. I wondered if maybe they'd print Explorer 2 in green instead of orange. I thought they'd probably keep the orange hand because that's sort of a throwback to the original Explorer 2. But no, they did nothing. They did nothing. You get nothing. So anyway, welcome to the new Rolex Explorer 2. What is catching a lot more people's eyes is another one of their reveals that we will transition into, which is the new, I'm going to air quote it again for a reason, Rolex Explorer, or some people call it the Rolex Explorer 1. And I'm air quoting that because they shrunk it. They took it back down to the original size. So again, new is relative. The Rolex Explorer has been running as a diameter watch of 39 millimeters. It's back at 36. I'm really surprised. I'm pleased, but I'm really surprised they did it. Because as I just noted, Rolex lately has been increasing the dial sizes on basically all their... It seems like anytime they put out a new watch, they raise the dial size. Maybe the size that it fits on the wrist stays the same, but they raise the dial size. Here, they actually shrunk the watch down. So it's back at 36 millimeters. Those that like the classic Explorer, and there are a ton of people that like the classic Explorer, I think will be really drawn to it. There are two versions. There is the all-steel version is still available. And incidentally, I've read that the price is actually reduced. So the MSRP on again, it's not going to matter because you're going to have to go to a gray dealer to get yourself an Explorer. I'm sorry. That's just how it is now. But the actual retail price did go down along with the size. So it's become a more affordable option. So that MSRP is $65.40 for those curious. But they now have a two-tone, which is at 10,800. This is weird. This is surprising to me. I actually am okay with two-tone, but a lot of people... Two-tone is polarizing. Some people despise two-tone. Two-tone watches, for those that aren't familiar, and you can see images on the screen of what this one looks like, are generally a steel and gold look. It was real big in the 90s. My first nice watch was a Citizen, and it was a two-tone on the bracelet. So it's sort of fallen out of favor, but maybe it's coming back. I mean, again, some people have always loved it, and some people have always found it tacky in some degree, I'm sure. So anyway, Rolex is doing this. The gold part is 18 karat. The steel part is stainless steel. And so it's just, this is the first time they've done a two-tone for the Explorer. They've done two tones on a number of their other tool watches. So this isn't a big leap for Rolex to do, but it's just something that they had never done with this particular model. I think that overall, and of course this has the new movement and all that stuff, 70-hour power reserve here as well. So I think by and large, most people, if they're going to get excited about anything that Rolex did, it's going to be the original Explorer, the Explorer 1. And I don't even think it's the two-tone. It's going back to the 36 millimeter. There are a lot of people that want a smaller Rolex, and your options at this point were basically Datejusts, Oyster Perpetuals, which you can still get in 36 or 34 if you want to go down that size. My point being that if you want something like in the 34 to 36 millimeter range, pretty much none of the modern tool watches fit that category. So if you were wanting Rolex, that meant, and they are hardy watches, but you needed Oyster Perpetual or you needed Datejust. So here you go, 36 Explorer. And a lot of people like the Explorer because it doesn't look like a Rolex. It's a very conservative dial. It doesn't look like the Oyster Perpetuals, which I think people think more stereotypically look like Rolex. Not blingy, but just not this. This looks, very, very functional, not dressy, really, in any capacity, unless you get two-tone. And then I guess it goes along with all the other two-tone tool watches that Rolex has decided to produce. They have revealed a couple of new dials for a couple of other watches. So one is they have now the new Cosmograph Daytona. As I mentioned, Daytona is like the hardest of the hard tool watches to get. So this one has a Meteorite Dial. Okay, I'm wondering if they came up with this a couple of years ago when Meteorite became like the big fad dial. I have seen some Meteorite dials I think look okay, and then there are others that I hate. I've never actually seen a Meteorite dial in person, and I imagine the texture looks better than it does in photographs, which always seem to give it a fairly flat look. Sometimes I think it's hard to read the text again. And again, functionality is my primary concern with watches. So anything that obfuscates the text makes me a little bit worried because, again, I wear watches to tell time. I do. I actually still do. I look at them more than I look at my phone when it comes to wanting to know what time it is. So, I mean, looking at this, I think it looks okay. If you're a Daytona fan, though, good luck. As always, it's a challenge to get any version of a Daytona, so, I mean, have fun with that. And then there is the new dial that they've revealed for the Datejust 36. Okay, so Rolex on their website describes this as a palm motif. I actually normally am a pretty big fan of the green dials that Rolex does. If you've seen their current Rolex Oyster Perpetual, it's got a neat forest green. Kind of reminds me of what you'd expect out of Swatch. It's a pretty bold green. Their prior Oyster Perpetuals they ran for a few years, at least in the 34mm variant, had a really cool green dial with some orange markers around where the indices were, which I think was basically a bit of a sleeper hit. It kind of became popular after it got discontinued, but that's often the case for Rolex, I would say. So here, I don't know. To me, this feels like Rolex looked at Grand Seiko, which has some exquisite dial designs, and was like, we need to do something so that we don't just cede this space to Grand Seiko. But this ain't no Grand Seiko. So, I mean, I'm sorry, compared to like the Snowflakes and such, Grand Seiko's finishing and dial design is top tier. In terms of unique dial design that's really attractive, I can't think of anything I would recommend over a Grand Seiko. It's just, and the price point's so much more attractive. Grand Seiko's moving up market on their costs, but they're still a lot more affordable than Rolex. And so this is okay. I don't know that I would take this over another more conservative Datejust style, but if you like green, if you like palms, if you don't live in the jungle and are worried about this falling off your wrist and losing it amongst the palm trees, it may be a good option for you. I think I don't know. I'm not a fan of it, but it's something different at least. So, and Rolex lately has been getting a little more bold with their dial designs. Again, those Oyster Perpetuals that they revealed last year in the really bold colors. That's something they hadn't done, I think, since the 70s. What are your all thoughts of what Rolex has revealed? Do you like the new Rolex Explorer 2? Do you like the new Rolex Explorer? Do you have thoughts on these dial designs? Go ahead and comment below. If you like these videos and you want to follow along when I release new content, go ahead and subscribe. And I'll probably be trying to cover more of the watches and wonders as we go along. There's going to be it's a lot of content dumping all at once. I like to carve things up by company. I just think it's easier for people that don't care about certain things to go ahead and skip around to find what they want. But until next time, take care, everybody.